And now I think we're in for another real treat. Kari Gottfried is a member of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Corvallis, Oregon. She's a lifelong UU and is recognized within our association for her work in leadership as a Luminary leader, alumna. Kari has participated in dozens of youth events within our district and across the country, including our regional, multicultural, and leadership summer programs. Last July, Kari spent a week at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago at the Unitarian Universalist Association's Summer Seminary. Boy, that's a mouthful. Program for UU youth. She is the Senior Youth Dean for General Assembly, which is happening next week in Spokane, Washington. Having Kari as our house guest, with so many good conversations last night we had about life in general, I have a great faith in the future for a greater USA. Yeah. Let's please give a warm welcome to Kari.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am very excited to be with you all today and share this space with you. This is my first time preaching as a young adult since I preached last Sunday. And I've only preached full-length sermons a few other times, but every time I started out with a couple of jokes, and I see no reason to stop now, especially here. And so I'd start off with my favorite ways to tell that you're a Unitarian Universalist. Now, you know you're a Unitarian Universalist if you think the Holy Trinity is reduce, reuse, recycle. And you know you're a Unitarian Universalist if you get mail from committees you didn't even know you were on. And I hear that you all are in the process of getting a new building. And you know you're a Unitarian Universalist if you know at least 2 people who are upset that trees had to die for your congregation. There's probably at least a few of you who are just realizing this now and will be thinking about that for the rest of the service. So, in the Bible, there's a pretty well-known story about David and Goliath. Goliath, a huge warrior on the side of the Philistines, challenged someone from the side of the Israelites to battle. David was chosen, and he knew that even with all of the armor in the world, he would not be able to win against Goliath by strength alone. So, he took his staff, and he picked up 5 smooth stones, and he put them in his bag along with a sling. And as he approached Goliath, David took the stones and slung them at Goliath, striking him on the forehead and knocking him over. And as Unitarian Universalists, we rely heavily on the teachings of our parent traditions, Judaism and Christianity, interpreting their stories through an open-minded perspective, seeking universal meaning in those ancient texts. In the centuries in which our faith has expanded outside the boundaries of traditional Judeo-Christianity, we've also expanded what we draw our inspiration from. Universalism is now sometimes interpreted to mean that we draw a universal meaning from all religious traditions. As the Reverend Leslie Takahashi says, they teach us to believe in the teachings of Jesus or Buddha, to believe in human potential or a power beyond a single will. But life embraces multiple truths, speaks of both and of and. And we draw many of our rituals from paganism, focusing on how to embody our faith, live fully as our best selves, and respect the earth and her people. Buddhism teaches us to be mindful, disciplined, and present in the moment, focusing on our actions and intentions to make the world better. Feminist and liberation theologies from various religious traditions remind us that we are a prophetic faith. We are not complacent in the face of change, but rather pushing forward beyond our comfort to challenge the status quo and our role in oppression. When I was in my religious education classes as a child, one year we spent the entire time learning about the world's religions. Every Sunday we listened to stories and made art projects reflecting what we learned. I really enjoyed having the chance to learn about all these other faiths, but sometimes I wondered, what about Unitarian Universalism? What did we believe? The connection I missed in those classes, and a connection I think we miss a lot of the time, is when we draw from other religions, how those truths connect to our truths. So, how can the story of David and Goliath, a story from one of our many sacred texts, be interpreted in Unitarian Universalism? Well, simply put, it's a story about the marginalized holding strong in the face of inequality, in the face of oppression. And UUs are no strangers to oppression, at least in terms of religious oppression. Unitarians and Universalists throughout the centuries fought for religious freedom and often sacrificed their lives for it. And so, it makes sense that James Luther Adams, a Unitarian minister and a 20th century theologian, used the story of David and Goliath and the 5 smooth stones that David carried to create the 5 smooth stones of liberal religious tradition. The beliefs about what it means to practice faith in a responsible, progressive way. Because although, as far as religion goes, we are for sure in the minority, we can still have a big impact on the world. But UUism isn't the only liberal religion, and the beliefs that we hold are held by many. When I tell my friends, both religious and non, that I believe in just and compassionate human relations, or the interconnected web of all existence, they can easily nod along and say, sure, I agree with that, but I don't want to be a UU. So where does our theology lie? What can we point to when asked not only what we believe, but what is the bedrock of our faith? Well, I did use the word bedrock on purpose, because as the title of the sermon suggests, there are some rocks that we can base our faith on. The 5 Jagged Rocks are an adaptation of James Luther Adams' Smooth Stones. They were created by ministers in our region, Nancy Bowen and Mike Morin, because like me, they wanted something that could build on the 7 principles, but focus even more on a declaration of our faith. But instead of the smooth stones created by Adams, they chose to recognize a faith that is dangerous and not always smooth going, according to Reverend Gretchen Haley. So our stones are jagged, because although we aren't perfect, theologically or otherwise, we are rough around the edges, and that doesn't make us any less valid. So the first of the 5 Jagged Rocks, although there isn't necessarily a specified order, is the belief that there is a unity that makes us one. Simply put, we believe that everything is connected. And I like this rock because it gives so much freedom for us to express our theology. Some might call that connection God, or the spirit of life, or the mystery of the universe. And as our 4th principle guides us to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, our 3rd reminds us that all of our faith discoveries are aided by acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. When I first really felt this unity, not only to my community, but to my community in search of something greater, when I went through the coming of age program at my church. We spent a weekend working on our credo boards, physical poster boards that display our statements of faith proudly to the congregation. Looking through my cohort's boards, I noticed that some believed in an all-knowing, all-loving, capital G God. Some attributed their being here to the stars and the skies in the beginning of time. One simply had a large question mark. That each of these youth were able to state their personal theology so proudly, while being able to have discussions with each other about those beliefs, is a testament to this jagged rock. There is a unity that makes us one. As the saying goes, we need not think alike to love alike. In the years since, I felt that unity in most of the churches I've been to. In the past 3 years, I've had the opportunity to travel to over a dozen churches across the country, and it really does feel like every church is my church. As UUs, there's a feeling of connection and wonder that's not hard to come by when I step into the sanctuary on a Sunday morning. I don't know if it's the way that congregations in Massachusetts and Washington, Missouri, and Indiana all know the words to Spirit of Life and proudly display pride flags and Black Lives Matter signs across their doors. Or if it's something deeper than that. The knowledge that we're all there because we're in search together for what that unity really is. The second jagged rock is that all souls are sacred and worthy. This is reflective of our first principle, the affirmation of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, but it focuses on something greater than simply intrinsic ethical goodness. You may have heard Thomas Starr King's well-known quip, Universalists believe God is too good to damn people. Unitarians believe they are too good to be damned. And I like this idea in general, but I like the jagged rock even more because it signals that our sacredness and worth are tied to something greater than each individual. We don't focus on whether someone is damned or divine because it doesn't matter where they're going. It matters that they are here. When we talk about all souls being sacred and worthy, it's a truly radical statement. When we proclaim that people are sacred just for being alive, when we don't focus on the color of their skin or their immigration status, don't think about who they love or who they are or how they move, just state that they are sacred and worthy, we are living into our theology as Unitarian Universalists.
Yes.
It gets better because the third jagged rock, courageous love transforms the world, is my favorite one. I love courageous love because it is deeper and wider than just love. When the Beatles say all you need is love, they're talking about courageous love. UUs do their very, very best to side with love, and I think that's what makes all the difference. Even though we've fallen short many, many times, part of what keeps me a part of Unitarian Universalism is that we keep trying. We get up again and again on the side of love. We are a justice-seeking faith, always reaching for that beloved community. And how do we create beloved community? With courageous love. Not love for oppression or hatred, because as much as we have to recognize that all souls are sacred and worthy, it's hard to think about that when they refuse to recognize the sacred and worthiness of my soul. But when I talk about courageous love, I don't want to begin to think about that, because in my view, it's much more important to focus on loving each other. Amen. Loving the promise of our shared liberation, because that's what's going to transform the world. Now the fourth rock is that the knowledge that truth continues to be revealed. Our revelation is not sealed. What we believe as a faith community has changed throughout history and will continue to change. Ours is one of the most transformative faiths, because instead of being defined by one set creed, we are defined by how we choose to be in covenant with each other. And that covenant can change, and will change, and has changed over time. Our principles, one of the most formative parts of Unitarian Universalism, were only adopted in 1960. And there may very well be people here today who were Unitarians or Universalists before the official 1961 merger. In fact, the seventh principle about the interdependent web of existence was only adopted in 1985. And science, one of our 6 sources, teaches us that we always have more to learn about life, the universe, and ourselves. As a species, we are always discovering, always adjusting our hypotheses and changing our realities. This is true for what we know of ourselves and the world, so why should it not be true about our faith? Freedom and tolerance have been central to our tradition since at least the Reformation. But I always wonder if the many famous Unitarians and Universalists we claim as our ancestors would claim us too. I have a feeling that if one of them walked in here and saw me, an 18-year-old woman of color at the pulpit, they might scoff and turn right back around. And if they made it through the service, they'd certainly be shocked to learn at coffee hour that a solid proportion of the congregants here don't even believe in God. But so is the journey of our faith, ever-changing, ever-growing, welcoming congregations through and through. As Universalist and Oregon poet laureate Edwin Markham once wrote, "He drew a circle to shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in." And as the Unitarian and Universalist merger showed us, our faith and its beliefs are appealing to many. If we can keep growing our circle, catching those at the margins and holding them close, revealing truth as we discover it, love and our faith can only get stronger. The final jagged rock, salvation in this life. This comes from our Universalist roots, and I think it might be the most radical jagged rock of them all. While most other faiths believe in an afterlife, as Unitarian Universalists as a whole, we understand that no one belief is guaranteed to be true. Each person can still have their own truth, but what's more important to us than what happens after we die is how we live. Maybe we go to heaven, or are reborn, or cease to exist. Maybe our fate is predetermined, or maybe our actions add up to determine whether we make it into the good place. But what can we do now? What can we do to make this world a better place? Not because of some future reward, but because our lives now depend on it. Because our liberation is tied up in one another's. Because we are connected, and when one of us is in pain, we all are in pain, because none of us are free until we're all free. Last summer, I was on staff at a week-long leadership school for UU youth in Seattle, where Emrys was as well. And the theme of the school was to help heal the world. It's from a Jewish prayer in which you say, "What is it for us to do? It is for us to heal the world." In the original story, there was a great light that came from the heavens, and it was divided and spread and cast about the world. And it is for each of us, who all have a part of light inside ourselves, to gather more, to gather that light together, and when we have all gathered it together, it will be heaven on earth. There is no salvation for us in this life unless it is for all of us. We have to gather that light together. That is what the promise of beloved community is. In 1790, when the Universalist Convention in Philadelphia adopted an anti-slavery resolution proposed by Benjamin Rush, who signed the Declaration of Independence, they were fighting for salvation in this life. When American Unitarians traveled to Europe and risked their lives to help Jews and other refugees escape the Nazis, they were fighting for salvation in this life. When Reverend James Reeb and Viola Liuzzo were killed in Selma after traveling there for the civil rights movement, they were fighting for salvation in this life. And today, as Unitarian Universalist congregations around the country vote to provide sanctuary for undocumented immigrants, as UUs travel to the southern border to protest and bear witness, as we proclaim that no one can be illegal on stolen land, we are fighting for salvation in this life. And Reverend Sophia Betancourt reminds us that we are in control of what we do with our daily living. If we, each one of us, represent a missing remnant in the fabric of our collective future, then together we can lean into the possibility that we have yet to fully experience in human history, a collective wholeness, an unassailable good. So immerse yourself unapologetically in what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist in these days. Then go out into the world and live knowing your faith matters. There have been many, many times in our history, and even today, when we have not done the right thing, when we have forgotten about what we are all working towards. But Unitarian minister Theodore Parker said it best when he said, "Look at the facts of the world. You see a continual and progressive triumph of the right. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but a little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, I am sure that it bends towards justice. And it bends that way because there are people who are bending it. Who are bending it towards justice because it is our duty to help heal the world, to fight for salvation in this life. This morning I shared with you some ways you might know you're a Unitarian Universalist. And yeah, maybe some of those were spot on. I mean, when I drove to Florence yesterday in my 2002 hybrid Prius, complete with shamelessly liberal bumper stickers and the radio set to NPR, I felt just a little like the stereotypical UU. But that isn't why I'm a UU. And as much as those descriptors tell us something about what we're like as a people, it doesn't explain who we are. We are a community of thinkers and seekers. We are heretics, the word coming from the Greek to choose. We have chosen how we want to be in relationship with each other, what we draw our wisdom from, and what we believe through our 7 principles, our 6 sources, and now our 5 jagged rocks. We are a radical, liberal, and theologically rich faith. And like David with his smooth stones, bending his sling towards Goliath, we will use our jagged rocks to bend the arc of the universe towards justice. Thank you.
Yeah.